Welcome back, City Builders. Kodiak the Kodiak here. On this final pre-launch episode of City Skylines 2 News Update, the creator embargo has been lifted, and boy did they have a lot to say. Today we'll spotlight a few videos from certain creators that will help you get off on the right foot by picking the correct map. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows, as CityPlannerPlays benchmarked the game and found some pretty unfortunate results. Now, before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you can keep up to date on all the City Skylines 2 news. And don't forget to leave a comment down below for your thoughts and opinions on City Skylines 2 and the release so far. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, before we get started, I just want to let you guys know that I'm recording this on Sunday afternoon, so if there's any new updates, which they have been pushing quite a few to the content creators, builds, versions of the game, there's certain issues going on. They're away for the weekend because it's the weekend, so they're not working. They just have limitations and they're not in the office right now, but I assume that there's going to be some pretty significant changes coming Monday. So take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. There may be a lot of changes made, and I will have a pinned comment down below for changes and updates to the game that happen on Monday, which is when this video will be going live. Now, if you're a little confused and you're like, Kodiak, you upload usually on Sundays. Yes, and that's for two reasons. One, all the stuff I just mentioned about it just kind of being better to upload this video on Monday because we're so close to launch and less things will be changing. I got to kind of like watch things unfold this weekend and kind of allow people to come to conclusions about the game that helps me break down and give you guys all of this information a little bit better. The second side of that was that my wife actually ended up in the emergency room on Saturday. She's fine. She has some specialist visits that she has to go to and everything should be settled. But, you know, that just kind of prevented me from getting everything together to have a video out on Sunday, which is why I'm recording this on Sunday afternoon. Now, starting on Thursday, content creators had full NDA lift. They were allowed to talk about the game completely freely, and we learned a lot about the game. And one of the only real criticisms that I saw about the game across the board was the performance, which has not been absolutely fantastic. I know a lot of content creators are pretty upset by the performance, and it's something that a bunch of them have talked about. CityPlannerPlays even made a video talking about benchmarking the game, and you know, he went out of his way to you know, try to get all these performance targets hit, and then they got hit with another update, and a bunch of things have changed, and so there has just been there's a lot going on in terms of updates and performance for City Skylines 2. It makes it really hard for me to kind of like break it down and just share all that information with you because things are constantly changing. But as of right now, when I'm recording this, the performance is not super great. Even if you have a super high-end system, when you start to get up to higher populations like 40,000 upwards of even like 100,000 population, you are definitely not going to be getting 60 FPS average. A lot of content creators have been apparently pretty frustrated about performance, which is why a bunch of them have been, you know, kind of talking about it, or at least alluding to it in their videos. Now, something I've been talking about a lot is that the last stage of game development is optimization, and they have to have all of the features implemented in the game in order to fully optimize them and get everything else kind of set in stone so they can get the FPS nice and good and start removing things from the game that are causing FPS issues. They don't even have the asset editor fully implemented yet, so I'm sure these are causing hiccups for them in order to get the game optimized fully. One important thing to note, I just want to have this out there, is that that's really the major criticism that I've seen from most content creators when talking about their gameplay experience, is that the performance is bad, but I haven't heard anything else. You know, I heard Canadian Moose Plays talk quite frequently about how he really is disappointed by the performance of this game, but then when asked, hey, are you gonna play the City Skylines 1 again? Are you gonna go back to City Skylines 1? He literally laughed and was like, oh no, I'm only playing this game from now on. And there were some other content creators who were maybe interested in continuing their City Skylines 1 cities, but then once they got their hands on this game, they were like, yeah, even through the performance, I'd still rather play this game. So I think that should just be a sign of how good the bones of this game actually are. So before we go fear-mongering performance here, just know that there's still some optimizations to come through, and one of those is actually based around the Cims, or the characters that populate your city. Now, City Skylines has been releasing development diaries, kind of explaining all of the, you know, new features that they've implemented in the game that they haven't really had time to talk about, or just haven't been interesting enough to kind of give us any details on. Things like the companies that populate all of our businesses. One of those dev diaries was on the Cims themselves, and they went into detail on how they kind of create them. They went over how they're randomly generated in certain ways, and then they push those different variations out to the live game. They also talked about the service that they use to actually create those characters themselves, and some people did some digging. Throughout this digging, they were kind of able to determine which mesh was used to create these citizens, and they have a whopping 18,000 triangles that make them up. They have fully rendered eyeballs, fully rendered tongues. They even have eyelashes that have like 500 by 500 pixel wide textures on them. Now, render distances should kind of compensate for the, performance hit that something like this should cause. Now, I don't know how many triangles or polygons or whatever City Skylines 1 Cims took up, but a lot of people have been making the connection that potentially the Cims themselves could be what's causing a lot of the performance issues. I was watching one content creator play, and there was like a bug in one of the assets where basically all of the Cims that kind of populated that specific asset would all go hang out in one specific spot. And anytime you looked at it, your FPS took a nosedive. I think there's a very real potential that just optimizing these Cims or even replacing them with a lower polygon like citizen could potentially net us anywhere between like 5 to like 20 FPS. Now, I think it's very clear that these Cims take up a lot of performance hit just to generate them. They have a ton of detail, and I think it's completely unnecessary. I get it adds a bit of immersion to the game, and it helps us create a more diverse and realistic city, but to be quite honest with you, I would just like an option to like turn them into low poly assets so I can get a little bit of performance when I'm playing the game. Especially for people on lower end hardware, I think this is just completely unnecessary to have such a high res character walking around your city all the time. Now, again, I'm not a modder, so I don't really have a way to test or like remove the citizens from the game, or at least replace them with a lower poly asset and see what the actual performance then nets us. So again, this is all speculation, but it does kind of paint the picture when you start to see some of these bugged out assets and you see all the Cims kind of lumped up in one spot, and you compare that to City Skylines 1 when that happens, and you didn't see that significant of a performance hit. Now, if we go back to when I was talking about how there's not really the asset editor fully implemented in the game, this could be one of the many reasons why they haven't been able to optimize these assets fully for the Cims. You know, they don't need all 18,000 of those polys, but they might not be able to remove them all without the asset editor being fully completed, and it's still in beta, and this could be like one of the many things that I'm talking about in terms of a massive performance upgrade that we could get down the road. Again, all speculation, but it's definitely leaning towards the Cims being a potential issue in terms of performance. Now, not to fearmonger this too much, just know that people have very low-end hardware and are able to run the game and launch it just fine. Now, speaking of performance on different hardware, CityPlannerPlays actually took a bunch of his own money, bought some specific rigs, and decided to benchmark the game himself. Now, I think this was a little risky from CityPlannerPlays' perspective because the game is still unfinished. This is in early access, and I know a lot of the creators were actually told that that was the final build of the game, I think early last week, which I was jaw-dropped when I heard that information and they said that, because I knew that there was some levels of optimization still to go. So when CityPlannerPlays benchmarked this game, this was before a recent optimization update that they did get to their build of the game, I think on Friday. So take all this information with a grain of salt, and this might all change by launch. There might even be a day one update that comes out that also increases performance, which is why I have a really hard time just definitively saying performance is bad, because this isn't the final build of the game. I think there had to have been some kind of miscommunication there. That being said, he did benchmark the game, and at the current point in time, he has a bunch of information on different hardware specs, from something like a 3060 Ti all the way down to a 970, all the way up to a 4090, as well as different CPU components. I think he only tested one Intel CPU, but you can easily figure out kind of like what the AMD equivalent of those are. He went all the way up to the super high-end AMD 7950X3D, all the way down to a 2600X, which is a pretty low-end CPU. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about his findings. I've kind of already summarized a little bit of what he found, so if you guys are interested more in that, I highly suggest checking out his video. I will put it up in the annotations right about now, and I'll also put it down in the description down below. I'll link to his video, so that way you guys actually have to go there in order to look at the spreadsheet where he actually has all the benchmark information. But I highly suggest watching his video. He kind of went into detail on some of his findings, and I think it was actually really valuable. All right, this is about the halfway point in the video where I usually like to thank my Discord subscribers. So I want to give a huge shout out to Wheatbread and J15 Wine and RKP, who are my highest tier patrons. So I want to thank you guys so much, as well as my other Discord subscriber, which are down below. And yeah, anyways, get back to the video. Make sure to drop a like, leave a nice comment, and do all that other cool stuff. Some really valuable performance information for you guys as well. I'm sure some other creators have said or done performance guides, but really make sure that you have global illumination turned down and VSync turned off unless you're getting some pretty bad screen tearing. Both of those settings are kind of night and day performance uplifts, so make sure you have those as low as possible. And from what I hear, global illumination doesn't even do that much from the graphics perspective in this game, so make sure you have those nice and low. City Planner Plays also found out a bunch of other information about the game. One of those was controller inputs. He tried to test the game on Steam Deck, which it did work on Steam Deck. The performance wasn't stellar from what I hear, but he did find controller input settings. Because Steam Decks have, you know, a built-in controller to them, he found some little icons that showed off that there was some controller settings on there, which is really cool. So for anybody who's looking to play the game on controller, you maybe stream your PC to your couch sometimes and you want to change input methods, or you maybe have some accessibility issues that require you to use controller-based inputs. Don't fear, it does seem like that's something that they're working on and have somewhat implemented into the game. I don't know how in-depth it is yet, and that's something that I'm sure that will come closer to the console launch, but you know, it seems like the baseline is kind of there for controller support. On top of that, City Planner Plays did test the game on a Mac Windows Mirror emulator thing. I'm not super familiar with these, but he could not find a way to run the game on that architecture. So if you are on Mac and you were trying to run the game on some kind of an emulator for Windows, it doesn't appear like it will even launch. So yeah, Mac users are just as out of luck as console players, if not more, because it doesn't look like there's any forecast for the game to come to Mac as of right now. Now, since City Planner Plays is a content creator, he has complete lifted NDA access to the game, as well as a bunch of other content creators. And I'd like to talk about some of them and the content that they've been able to put out now. They're not just restricted to the 3 videos before launch. They have complete unrestricted access to talk about and make content for the game. Overcharged Egg and Cities by Diana both released kind of map guides that I saw. Some other creators might have as well, but these were the 2 that I saw, and I actually think they both did a really good job breaking down the maps. Overcharged Egg is kind of known for his tier lists, and he did a tier list breakdown for the maps, and Cities by Diana went through and kind of explained which ones are for beginners and intermediate and expert city builders. So if you guys are looking for any of that information, I'll leave those videos in the description. Canadian Moose Plays also did a video where he kind of did more of like a urbanism explainer along with City Skylines 2. It was relatively short. I really liked the video. It slapped. I highly suggest you guys go check that one out. I really like that content shift from Moose, and I hope he makes more of those videos. I think City Skylines 2 helps enable us to kind of explain things like this a little bit better, because we have more of the tools at our disposal to make a more realistic city simulation. So I'm really excited to see more of those comparison videos from any of the creators, as well as Canadian Moose Plays. Overcharged Egg also did a bunch of guides to how to place roads. Obviously, the road tools are completely different, and some of them are a little finicky to kind of get just right. So I highly suggest checking out that video. Again, all of these are going to be in the description. And the last video I want to highlight is from Few Candy, where I think she absolutely nailed these 80 tips and tricks for City Skylines 2. I've done nothing but consume City Skylines 2 content for like the past 6 months, and I actually learned a ton of stuff from her video. I highly suggest you check it out. I had never really heard of Few Candy until recently, and her content is flippin' awesome. So definitely go check out that video down below. Now, the absolute last thing I want to talk about is the Paradox mods. Now, we did a whole video on that. Again, that video will also be linked down in the description, as well as in the annotations right now, just like everything else was. But I want to talk a little bit more about it. I think there's a lot of misconceptions that people have about Paradox mods, and I think that, you know, it's natural to be a little scared of change, and especially because, you know, I think a lot of people have a lot of trust in Valve, and they don't necessarily have a lot of trust in game developers, especially one as big as Paradox and Colossal Order. But I think there's been a lot of fear-mongering, especially from just general consumers, about what Paradox mods is going to look like, and some misconceptions about what it is. Even I was victim to this, because I was basing a lot of information that I had about Paradox mods based on how it functions for other games, and Maddie confirmed in the developer livestream that it is not going to look like or work like it does for other Paradox games as it will for City Skylines. Apparently, they completely rebuilt kind of how it functions for City Skylines, so it will look quite different than it has in the past for other games. Maddie said, and I quote, "I really hope people appreciate how much time and effort we put into it to allow non-Steam players to have access to mods." And I really agree with her. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we've kind of gatekept the modding community to just the Steam platform for such a long time. I had a bunch of friends who had the game on Epic, and they were just basically gatekept out of the modding community because it was essentially just stuck on the Steam platform. There was a massive amount of people in my comments, in the YouTube live stream for the developers, and in a lot of people's live streams that they were coming to the conclusion that by moving off the Steam Workshop, it opens the door for Paradox and Colossal Order to start charging people for mods. Now, first off, they already do that with content creator packs, and that business model is still going to stick around. So those portion of paid mods will still kind of exist, and they're not really paid mods, they're paid assets. I don't know how many times Maddie has to say this. Maybe people just haven't seen her say it, they haven't been exposed to it yet, but they will never, ever, 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 ever charge for mods on Paradox mods. Everyone in the comments saying they're going to start charging for mods. They're fearful they're going to start charging for mods. This just allows Colossal Order and Paradox to start charging for mods. They're not. They're not charging for mods. They are not. They will not. They have no plans to. And Maddie has said it about a bajillion times at this point. So please begin to rest easy that they're not going to be locking mods and assets behind a paywall. This entire decision was just there to allow for different platforms or different launchers of the game. If you have the game on Epic, the Windows Store, Game Pass, console, to have access to those mod workshops, so that way it's not just exclusive to Steam. And for those of you wondering why they don't just have access to multiple platforms, well, it just makes it easy and simple to have it all in one that's built into the game launcher. So I think that kind of wraps everything up. It's really hard for me to break down any of the new news because the game is constantly updating right now, and I don't want to get any of the information necessarily wrong. There's some stuff that I obviously disclose that I think is speculation, but I also just don't want to like share some information with you guys that is constantly changing, like performance, for example. It's something that's constantly being updated, and I don't want to just definitively say that performance is going to be terrible at launch when we don't know what they have in their quality assurance testing right now that hasn't been pushed out to the creators' builds. There's also some pretty glaring bugs right now in the creator builds. Like there's been some really weird LODs and just not great stuff, but I've heard words that those are already in their QA testing, and it's something that's going to be fixed really quickly on Monday when they get back to the office. So I don't want to report on any of that to you guys because I think it would be a little disingenuous to kind of like fearmonger some stuff that I know is getting changed, and the game's just not fully out yet. Speaking of it not being fully out yet, Tuesday is the launch, so I want to tell you guys that I am doing a subathon on Twitch, which you can find a link to down in the description, for the launch of City Skylines 2. Our timer is already starting at 40 hours. If you guys have any questions, you're a little speculative about the game, you maybe canceled your pre-order, or you haven't pre-ordered it yet and you want to ask some questions about the game, I will obviously give you guys my honest and full opinion on the game on my Twitch stream if you guys come into chat and ask me about it. Who knows, you guys might get gifted a sub and you'll have fun with all the fun times to be had with me and my community over there. I'll be a lot more open and honest about my opinions about the game and how it feels to play once I actually get my hands on it, and it's technically the full launch version of the game that I feel is kind of like worthy of like criticizing. I know that the current build is kind of the review copy, and like I guess it's they're kind of saying like this is open to be reviewed, especially by like all the reviewers, which I'll leave a link to the Metacritic reviews conglomerate down below as well. But since I don't have my direct hands on the game, it just feels really weird like kind of giving full unrestricted like opinions and thoughts on the game when I haven't even played it yet and it's not fully out yet. But it will be on Tuesday, so swing on through. I also don't know if there'll be a video next week. Depends on how long the subathon goes for. It does have like a little bit of a cap on it. I have to go back to work the following week, so we'll see. That being said, the week after that, we'll definitely be back to making normal videos again, and we might even start a Let's Build series here on the YouTube channel, so make sure you guys have notifications turned on and you guys are subscribed to keep up to date with all of that. I want to thank you guys for joining me on this content journey throughout the launch of City Skylines 2. It's been an absolute pleasure. We hit the 2,000 sub mark on YouTube, so we'll be doing some YouTube live streams sometime in the near future, so stay tuned for that, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Deuces.